Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and joining us today is someone who is making their fourth appearance on the show and honestly needs no introduction at this point, as his work speaks for itself, Mike Volpe. In case you missed my last few episodes with Mike, he's an investigative journalist who has pioneered reporting alternative news on topics such as immigration reform, police corruption, politics, and what we've mainly focused on in this show, corruption within the family court system, and how and why child trafficking is able to legally happen under the noses of society. I'll link Mike's playlist in the show notes below for your reference. I encourage you to listen to all his previous episodes for a greater picture of how these systems work, or rather, don't work. Today, we're going to discuss a very controversial yet important topic, parental alienation. If you've been following my podcast and have listened to Mike's episodes, or any of the parents who have been on my show alleging the family court trafficked their children to their abusive parent, the words parental alienation come up rather frequently. This topic is controversial in the sense that the definition is so poorly and vaguely defined that it leaves a lot to be desired in how it's interpreted and by whom. Mike's work is recognized nationally and internationally, and it's been an honor getting to share snippets of what he is working on around the clock on the show. He's someone I look at with certainty as an authority on the family court system, and it'll do you well to listen to him. Whether it's you or someone you know dealing with the court system, knowledge is absolutely necessary when you enter the court, especially when it involves our little ones. I also highly recommend you subscribe to Mike's Substack. It is an absolutely jam-packed daily with information on cases like what you'll hear today and more, and it's an invaluable tool to further your learning on these subjects and topics. All the resources we cover today, along with his Substack, can be found in the show notes below. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming my guest of honor, independent researcher and reporter, voice for the voiceless, child abuse advocate, and whistleblower ally, Mike Volpe. Welcome back, Mike. Thanks for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me, Emma.
Absolutely. So as I said in the intro, this word comes up a lot. Anybody who's listened to our episodes together who follows you, this word is always brought up in cases that go to court, and for a very good reason. Could you start us off by telling us what is parental alienation, why is it important, and just some of the nuances that you've discovered about it?
So the simplest way to describe it is when one parent turns the child or children against the other parent during a divorce. So that sounds simple enough, but it's very broad and nebulous. And as you said, it's poorly defined. I've seen a lot of different definitions. The one I gave you is the one I generally use. And so the main problem with the psychological term is there's no agreement on like the diagnostics, so diagnosing it, treating it, the symptoms or whatever. Like people agree on certain things, but there's no real agreement. And so let's say, for instance, you tell your daughter, your mom is a terrible mom, but you did it once. Well, I think no one would say that if you just did it the once. No one would say that's parental alienation because everyone has a bad moment. So but how many times? If you said it 3, 30, something in between, there's no agreement. And what happens is someone is brought in using their judgment, and they will determine that if it's 3, that's okay. No, 10, well, you said it 10 times, parental alienation. And So it's the way, and I always use this comparison. It's not like you tear your ACL. If you do that, you go get an x-ray, and the x-ray will tell either it's torn, partially torn, or it's fine. And there's no, maybe you get a second opinion, but there is no subjectivity to the tear. It's either torn or it's not. There's nothing but subjectivity. And so what happens is abusive people then misuse this term deliberately. And primarily when someone is accused of abuse, what they do is they turn around and they say, no, you're coaching the kids. You're just trying to alienate me. And for some reason, they can't just say you're coaching the kids. You know, parents coach kids. That absolutely happens. There's definitely a debate on whether it happens almost never to it happens a lot. Depending on how young the child is, it's not necessarily that hard to coach a child. I think teenagers are more difficult than a 4-year-old. So that's something to be careful of. But you don't say you're coaching the child. You don't say you've put these thoughts in their head. You say it's parental. You say all that plus it's parental alienation. And so you confuse the issue. The one example that I always like to bring up, it was a woman named Julie Goffstein. She, her husband, and their 6 kids were all Orthodox Jewish. Her husband decided he didn't want to be. The rest of the family stayed Orthodox, and he claimed as a result he was alienated, and it worked. So this is, I always say parental alienation is whatever you want it to be. That's a great example. And there's so many examples. And, one example of how jacked up the case is, people will have like a toddler or a newborn. They'll say, I'm alienated. Well, my definition is you've turned the child against the other parent. Okay, if the child is 8 months old, they can't be turned against you because they're not old enough to hate you. So that child is probably at an age where the textbook definition, if you will, of parental alienation doesn't exist. And what that person means is they don't see the child. Right? Usually that's what the person means. For some reason, people can't say my ex doesn't let me see my child. They can't just say that. Maybe it's too long. Maybe a whole sentence is like a lot of words, and they just want to say parental alienation. But they don't, and I call that contact denial. And it's not just like a difference in terms or difference in nuance. Contact denial. You are denying contact with the child or children. That's what you're doing. Specifically, nothing else. You're denying contact, however you're doing it. And then that's easy to prove. I haven't seen my child in 6 months. Contact denial. Parental alienation is something slightly different. It may involve contact denial. It doesn't even have to. You may turn it supposedly, like you've turned the kids so much that when they see the other parent, it's hell for the parent because they're aggressive, whatever it is. And that stuff definitely happens. And as I say, if they just narrowed it and said that, like, when you beat into the child's head that the other parent is so bad that they're hostile to the parent, to the other parent, would say, okay, then I agree, parental alienation is real as long as it's that and only that. But as I said, Julie Goffstein is accused of parental alienation because she stayed Orthodox Jewish. So, it's so broad. It's anything and everything. And then as a result, a lot of abusive people use it. And that's where the child trafficking happens because they traffic the child through the court system. And when I say the court system, part of it is as soon as parental alienation is accused, it triggers all of these people to get appointed. Therapists, guardian ad litem, other people. The lawyers make a lot of money. So they're trafficked through the courts because they often don't go from one parent to the other. But even if they do, it comes along with the appointment of a guardian ad litem, the court ordered therapy, all of these other things that people are making money on. So the system is making money on moving the child from the safe parent to the abusive parent. And there's your child trafficking. And that definitely happens. It happens in a massive amount. And as a result, kids are living in abusive situations. A lot of people are making money off of it. It's no joke, and it's not semantics or some academic argument. This is a broad, bogus term, and it's misused. And as a result of its misuse, you have a lot of abusive people getting kids. And if you don't care about that, you don't care about the wrong thing. That's very, very important. So I had a few like visual aids. So the first one is an article that I wrote in 2015, if you can get that up. And it's called Making Divorce Pay, and it's about a group called the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. And they are a global group. And this is like the wizards behind the scenes who are doing this. And they are primarily responsible for propagating this term in a variety of ways. But one of them is they put out a lot of research webinars, seminars, other like they have a quarterly newsletter. And if you can get it, it'll say Gardner and PAS. And I think a little bit, oh, right there, Richard Gardner and PAS. So PAS stands for Parental Alienation Syndrome. That's what this guy, Richard Gardner, created. Basically, they've removed the syndrome definitely, and they just call it parental alienation. What you need to know about Gardner is he was pro-pedophile. All right. At a minimum, he was pro-pedophile. All right. So here's something that he said. The determinant as to whether the experience will be traumatic is the social attitude towards these encounters. He's talking about child molestation encounter. There's a certain amount of pedophilia in all of us. And hold on, last one. Pedophilia is considered the norm by the vast majority of individuals in the history of the world. This is the guy who first popularized the term and put it into the courtrooms, this quack. And yes, Woody Allen accused me of Pharaoh of parental alienation, and Gardner, and look what he said: screaming sex abuse is a very effective way to wreak vengeance on a hated spouse. And this statistic is from 2008, but 58,000 children per year are forced into abusive situations in the US yearly, according to the survey. And Dr. Silver, she did the survey, and she said almost entirely due to the misuse of PAS, parental alienation syndrome. And there's many, many stories, or many people, many stories now that have been told where parental alienation has been misused. So that 58,000, it's definitely not out of line. I would say it's probably more. And as I said, it's a like 15-year-old statistic, so it probably is more. And through the rest of this section, you can see how much the AFCC has pushed. Here, let me read this one paragraph. A 2012 conference from New York AFCC on parental alienation described the number of behaviors that the alienated parent exhibits, including unfounded abuse allegations. Actor Alec Baldwin claims to be a victim. He thinks that Kim Basinger alienated him from his daughter, Ireland. And in his book, he goes through it. And here, and Baldwin even admits that it's misused. But the fact that some abusive parents successfully dodge consequences of their actions by using PAS as a defense does not and cannot negate the existence of parental alienation in custody disputes. It can and it does, because it's so broad and nebulous that until you narrowly define it and say exactly what it is, it's not real. And so, it's interesting. Basinger's never said anything about their relationship. She's never responded to the allegations. He's talked a lot. I don't know what happened. And that daughter is the one that he was recorded with a really nasty voicemail. Now, he says that's because he was exasperated and frustrated, but there was certainly verbal abuse on his part towards his daughter, who he claims is alienated from him. And I think that's it for that section. Can you get the second? So now we're going to go through a few of the cases
real
that
quick, I just want, this article is really special. Could you just tell people how many hits it's got and just a little bit about it? Because this is a really, everybody needs to read this.
Right. It's called Making Divorce Pay. It's on the Capital Research Center. I don't know exactly how many, but I'm estimating between 100,000 and 1 million. But let me give you a behind the scenes. The editor who edited this was Matt Vadum. He works at Epic Times now. But when I submitted it to him, it was good, but it was a little bit of a mess. and he took it and he polished it, and then he sent it up to his editor, and they made it so good. And I did most of the research and most of the writing, but if it hadn't been for Matt, this thing wouldn't have been the hit that it was, because he made a few very key adjustments as a good editor is supposed to do, and he did. But this, I've had people from all over the world contact me about AFCC in this article, because after it got published, they noticed that their cases were similar, and they started looking for connections to AFCC in their cases, and oftentimes they find it because it's a global organization. It's family court judges, family court lawyers, psychiatrists, therapists. Basically, if you work in family court, can be a member. It's on the surface, it's not a big deal. It's a trade group. It's not really a big deal. But what basically happens is all the power players get together, and then they all appoint each other. This is where they learn that, and you can see later in the article, like, one of the philosophies of AFCC is there's no problem that a court appointee can't solve. And this is what AFCC is pushing. So parental alienation is a problem. Get a guardian ad litem, get a reunification therapies, get this, get that. And they are the ones recommending that as soon as you identify parental alienation, you really should have a guardian ad litem, and also a therapist, and also this, and a fourth person. And that's how these 3-4 people are constantly being put on the case. And 9 times out of 10, who's appointed? Someone who's AFCC. 9 times out of 10, who's the judge? AFCC. They all go to the same seminars, to the same functions. So who do you think they're going to appoint? The people they meet at the mixers. And it's like a nice little boys club. And all of these folks appoint each other. They make a ton of money doing it.
So scary.
Okay, can we get to the second?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a specific case near Houston. And in this case, dad was accused of sexual molestation. He was charged. And then as the indictment went along, or as the case went along, out of the blue, the prosecutors dropped the charges without a good explanation. And as soon as the charges were dropped, dad said, aha, that's not real. I'm being alienated. So what you're going to hear is like a couple of minutes of a conversation I had with dad, the accused molester, the accuser the person accusing of parental alienation. His ex is Rosie Alanis, but this is his attorney. Her name is Stephanie Prophet. And I've had some other folks reach out to me about Prophet. She, we'll see how deep I dig into all of this, but Prophet herself, I don't think is a very ethical lawyer. But this is what you'll hear is, number one, her try to justify and defend the sexual molestation, but then she at some point just goes off on mom. And that's basically the attitude these people who propagate parental alienation take, that this other parent is just the lowest of the low, trash, complete trash. And my client has done nothing wrong. Everything that's happening is the other parent's fault.
And for people listening or watching, this is on Mike's Substack. So you're going to get
it's michaelvolpe.substack.com. Hit the blue, yeah.
Okay.
And then let's listen to this. Okay, so I'm calling about the case where you represent Mr. Granados. Is that something? Okay. So it's my understanding that your client was once charged and indicted through a grand jury with touching his son inappropriately. Is that right?
I don't know if he ever got indicted. I know he was found not guilty.
He wasn't found not guilty. They dropped the charges. It's not the same thing, is it? It's not the same thing.
I don't know about that. I didn't represent him on the criminal stuff.
Okay. But he's been accused by his son of touching him inappropriately.
He's been accused, yes.
By his son, the one you're
trying. Are you going to argue with me? Your client, the child had an attorney who found that it was in the best interest of the child to have a relationship with his father.
Right. And
But the mother kept adding new stuff to the claim. Every time she would get shut down, she would add something new to the claim. And there was a finding that she had alienated this child. Parent alienation is the thing. And
so you're a big
she is the
believer.
one,
You're a big believer in parental alienation.
absolutely.
Really, it's not recognized by the APA, by the World Health Organization. It's run by a bunch
It's recognized by the court system.
Yeah, by clearly a corrupt court system. He's going through a reunification therapy now. Is he going through a reunification therapy now?
I don't know if he is or not. My client
He is. Your client's in the session, and here's something you should know. His son's been recording them.
All right, can you pause it?
Pretty awful.
So that's what we're gonna listen to next. But she laid it out like the child's lawyer thought the child should have a relationship with both parents. That's how she like. That's how all of this operates. It's in the best interest of the child to have a relationship with this guy who he accused of child molestation, because you heard him, the child had an attorney, and that attorney said it. So that, and then we tried that, and mom just kept putting more and more roadblocks. And that's one of the characteristics that often the accused alienator will get is uncooperative. That's like one of the like buzzwords for alienation, like you're uncooperative. That's one way that you're alienating. You're uncooperative with the court. So as I mentioned, and one of like the court professionals that they bring in when there's alienation is these reunification therapists. And I think you've got the kids secretly recorded the reunification therapist. You know what? I think I don't know if we're going to be able to, we can hear the recording, but I think it's too faint. But the reunification therapy was coercive. At one point, she said, "You have no choice. You have to be here." And then at another point, she said, "If you don't come into the room, we're going to come back next week and the week after that and the week after that until you finally come in." And then at one point, they basically tag team. It was dad and the reunification therapist were browbeating this kid, trying to force him to stop resisting having a relationship with his father. And the whole time I'm listening to this, I'm just thinking, isn't therapy supposed to be therapeutic?
Yeah.
And it was the opposite of therapeutic. If you want to scroll down to get to the YouTube, I don't remember how far in we wanted to go. But yeah, right there. I think if you started about 3 minutes in at the top one, that's one of the therapy sessions.
Gotcha.
So this is, I think he's either 12 or 13 as the boy, and he outsmarted the reunification therapist, whose name is Jean Guez, Guez. So she's right now going to browbeat and try to coerce, let's say either a 12 or a 13-year-old, and the whole time she's not smart enough to realize he's been secretly recording her.
You know, the other thing too that really bothers me about this, it's not only how coercive they are to the parents, but even the children, when they finally get to have a voice, they're just automatically accused of being, you know,
rotten, a liar.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
I know they don't say coach,
you're
but
a bad,
like
you're a bad kid. Yeah, you're a bad
really
kid.
sad.
You're a liar, disrespectful. You hear that kind of stuff. Absolutely. And then the other case, which is going to be out of Utah, they did that with a kid. Just absolutely browbeat the kid. And yeah, a lot of it is to try to justify everything they're doing. Like, you're this terrible kid. What we're doing is good for you. But go about 3 minutes in and see if this is worth it to listen to, because it isn't like the recording quality isn't that great. It was probably in his like pants, but a lot of it you can hear, and you definitely can hear her being very coercive. And so you should, if you play, you should hear a female voice. That's Dr. Jean Guez.
Okay, and go to about 3 minutes in. Okay.
Yeah. Right there.
Oh, no, that's fine. I just know that there's a thing when a judge signs an order, that was agreed to by your mom and dad. They both asked for it and agreed to it. The judge signed it, and that turns it into money. Just for your family, not for everybody. So it's important. And I'm sure your mother and dad both want me to stay the law, right? But which law is it? Pardon me? What law is it? But the order that your mom and dad agreed to is the law. When the judge signs it, turns it into law.
All right, I think it's going to be too faint. I don't know if you heard her, but she starts talking about the court order that put her on the case. And she's trying to convince him to come into the room by saying, there's a court order and the judge signed it. Your mom agreed to it. And so that's why you need to come into the room. This is a therapist talking to a 12-year-old about court orders, and you have to come in because there's a court order. And I think one part you probably heard, the judge signed it. She's referring to the court order. This is a therapist. Does that sound therapeutic?
No.
No. Yeah, and this is what you get throughout. You get accused of parental alienation, then you get this reunification therapist type person, and they're usually this coercive type person, like this lady Jean Guez. Now, the one unique feature of this case was that Rosie had sole custody, but they brought in this reunification therapist to basically like move the case along to eventually give dad sole custody. As soon as I released this article and the therapist realized she was secretly recorded, she got off the case. And this was like May, June, and nothing's happened since then. See, look, she says, you don't get an opinion. He's like, I don't want to come in. She goes, you don't get an opinion. And I'll have to, and if he doesn't come in, I'll have to tell the judge there may be punishment for your mom. This is how she was trying to get him to go into therapy and to agree to be in the therapy. By saying there may be consequences for your mom.
It just shuts the kid up. The kid's already traumatized because it's with an abused parent separated from the protective parent, and now it's being threatened by the only people that might be able to help. Yeah.
Right. All she cares about is I'm going to get him in the room and put him through my program and break down his defenses. And that's basically I put this in because the district attorney that was handling this case is Kim Ogg over in Harris County, and she's extremely soft on crime. And if you want to check out Wayne Dolcefino's video, he shows how soft on crime she is. And here, this guy was indicted and they just let the charges go. And it's another example of her being soft on crime. And, you know, it does put Rosie in a difficult position because you got the indictment and then the indictment goes away. And then once the indictment goes away, it's a lot easier for her ex to say, see, it was parental alienation. They wouldn't have dropped the indictment if it wasn't. And they never explained to her why they didn't. But Kim Ogg is the DA, the elected DA. I don't know if she was specifically on this case, but it's her office, whether she was or not. Okay, let's get the next link up. And so this is another parental alienation case in Harris County, same county. And we won't talk too much about the case, but again, dad is physically abusive in other ways, and he immediately goes to the parental alienation. There's if you can scroll down, there's a nonprofit that I found called Children for Tomorrow, and they operate in Harris County. Keep going. And primarily in Harris County, and there they are. And they are propagating this term. And if you can go, that's a template they put together. And so here, let me read it. The court finds that a treatment-focused assessment of the party to this suit would be of assistance to the court and in the best interest of the children. Therefore, it is ordered that Children for Tomorrow is appointed to prepare the treatment-focused assessment. And down here, Children for Tomorrow is authorized to collect a reasonable fee in the amount of $3,500. They're a nonprofit, a 501c3. They pay no taxes, but they still charge $3,500 for this assessment. And the assessment is the beginning of a program that they have. So they are propagating this term in Harris County. And this thing's a template, meaning they put this together to say, if you want us on the case, basically get the judge to sign an order like this. We've already got one. Just tell them about our order and then and that's how we'll get on the case. And they're on so many cases that they created a template that you just fill in your blanks. But get us on this case for our assessment, $3,500. They charge $3,500 for an assessment. Who knows how many cases they're on, but they're a nonprofit, meaning they don't pay taxes on any of the money that comes in. And they are absolutely propagating this term in Harris County. And I've seen nonprofits like this who propagate this term, and a couple other ones right here. Can go scroll up a little bit.
Yeah.
Council for Children's Rights in North Carolina, Children's Law Center of Central North Carolina. They charge fees. They do these court services and same things. They propagate this parental alienation term, just like Children for Tomorrow. And I don't think it's a coincidence that all three of these nonprofits just happen to have children in their name. They want to make it seem that they are like for the kids. So you'd never suspect that they're up to no good. And in fact, they are. And so all throughout Harris County, this particular nonprofit is propagating this stuff. Rosie told me her guardian ad litem said that everybody receives training for them. That's how they all know about parental alienation. They weren't directly involved in this case, but in the second case, but they are directly involved in a lot of cases because they're involved so much that they have their own template that they've created. And so, this is just 2 out of many in Harris County where parental alienation is alleged, and immediately you have either a guardian ad litem, a reunification therapist, probably both appointed, and those people are making money, the lawyers are making money, everybody makes a lot of money, and they're trying to move kids from the safe parent to the abusive parent. Let's get the next one up, and this is a case out of Utah.
Now, Mike,
And
I have when parental alienation, when was that term invented for, do you know?
the roots are in the 70s, but
Okay.
really it was Gardner popularized it in the 80s. So I
Okay.
would say it's
Wow.
really been taking off the last 40 years.
Oh my gosh, that's
You know, before that, they essentially do the same thing, but say Munchausen by proxy. They'd say mom is like putting all of these hurts in the child's head because of Munchausen by proxy. It's like a cousin to it, but there was a little bit of it in the 70s. I don't even think they called it parental alienation yet, but Gardner's the guy, and he really started using it in the 80s. So I'd say about 40 years it's been used.
Oh my goodness.
So the photo of the person you see, her name is Commissioner Catherine Conklin. Commissioner is just a junior judge. I've taken to calling her the idiot junior judge. And as we go through the story, you will hopefully see why I call her an idiot. So I think I told you when we were going to play this first, but let me set this up.
Yep.
So this particular case, James Barnett versus Amanda Barnett. James has been accused, here, scroll down a little bit. James has been accused by, oh, and by the way, Commissioner Conklin, here, scroll down a little bit, is a member of the Utah chapter of AFCC, right there on the bottom, Commissioner Conklin. She's one of the members of the Utah chapter of the AFCC. So no surprise with what you're about to hear, because she is an acolyte of this AFCC thinking. And there's me quoting from the treatise, Making Divorce Pay. So they brought in a guardian ad litem. They brought in a reunification therapist. They all the kids say dad's abusive physically, sexually, emotionally, verbally. He's definitely verbally abusive. There are 3 multi-minute audios of him being extremely verbally abusive. He's been accused of rape, of hitting the kids, all kinds of stuff. That's his attorney, Sidney Mateus, who works for another nonprofit Legal Services of Utah. But I think what we want to do is listen to a part of the court hearing. So I think we want to go up. Yeah, 129. So who you're about to hear first, it's going to be quickly the junior judge, Catherine Conklin, and then it's going to be Sidney Mateus, who's going to lay out, she's dad's attorney, why this is parental alienation. So this is really like a very prototypical argument of someone who believes in parental alienation, what you're about to hear.
I have not followed up with.
Oh, wait, no, this is the wrong, no,
with
go
the
back. That's not,
therapist.
wait, is that, I think that's not the, no, go back
Should I
to,
just do it to
this,
from the
yeah.
article?
Yeah, no, it's in the
Okay.
article, yeah.
Okay,
It's
we'll-
at 1:30, right there.
Gotcha, okay.
All right.
1 second, move this to. All right, here we go.
Attorneys kind of have an idea from our discussion what the issues are that we're facing. We'll see where we need to go. Ms. Mateus.
Thank you, Your Honor. As you know, when his dad is here, decided to remove Austin Cameron from Ms. Barnett's care. There have been significant issues with dysfunctional behavior, with care time, with therapy, and with basically every aspect of the case as it relates to the children's relationship with Ms. Barnett, and by extension with Alexis. At this time, we are requesting that Cameron and Austin be removed from Ms. Barnett's care and transferred to Mr. Barnett's care. There have been many allegations of abuse that have not been substantiated. There's been no proof that's been offered, no protective orders, no filed criminal cases, no substantiated decent investigations. There have been references to notes that the children have written that have never been produced. There is no proof whatsoever that these abuses have occurred, and Ms. Barnett has perpetuated to these things.
All right, I think we're losing it. So I think you heard her. There's been all sorts of abuse, none of it substantiated, and that's why we know it's parental alienation. And look, that's part of the problem that when these cases come up, cops hate investigating them because they hate child custody cases. CPS or whatever you call it in your jurisdiction, they're incompetent at best, corrupt at worst, so they never substantiate anything. And so that's part of the problem. But do you see how slick it is? Everybody's saying abuse, no one can substantiate, and that's how we know it's parental alienation. So Ms. Mateus works for a nonprofit, and they do what's called low bono, which means they offer discounts to their clients. And I'm wondering just how many abusive people have used those discounts to be able to carry a much longer divorce and child custody case, because you're charging them half of what you normally would charge. So as a result, they can afford a lot more of your legal services, because I don't think that's what a nonprofit is supposed to do. And that's definitely what the nonprofit is doing in this case. And I am curious as to how often this particular nonprofit Legal Services of Utah takes on a case for somebody like James Barnett, who's clearly abusive, and then carries him. And Jessica, this is an email that one of the kids wrote to Jessica Reed, and basically she's completely non-responsive to these folks, to the kids, even though she's the guardian ad litem. And I should backtrack. What you heard was from September 13th. So Mateus was arguing that they should switch custody immediately because of this parental alienation, and Conklin granted it to her, the junior judge. If you could scroll up, I think you want to go, I think it's either just over 15 minutes or just over 16 minutes. I've got it in my notes. Now you're going to hear Conklin, the junior judge, and she's going to basically make her argument for why this is parental alienation.
Should I start here, or should I go to, in the notes that you sent me, it said 22 minutes, 55 seconds?
Yeah, then 22 minutes, 55 seconds. Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's right.
Try that.
Okay. All right, a little bit more. There you go.
Here we go.
Okay, so this is going to be the junior judge, Catherine Conklin.
To that is only when necessary to protect a child and there is no less restrictive means. There have been allegations of abuse both of Ms. Barnett and of the children in this case. They have been investigated thoroughly by DCFS and by law enforcement. None of them have been supported. In part, that's because of the inconsistencies in the various stories, and in part because of the lack of physical evidence in situations when there clearly would be physical evidence. The court also notes that the parties up to the instigation of this petition to modify were operating under an agreement that they had made, wherein Mr. Barnett would have parent time based on 30-3-35 with the exception of 2 midweeks instead of 1. That parent time was proceeding, by all reports, fine until something happened, and according to Ms. Barnett, the children started refusing to go. Ms. Barnett, this is the point where I think that you've got some culpability here. Okay. I don't know what happened between you and Mr. Barnett, but there is nothing that supports the fact that these children are in any danger with him. And I think Ms. Mateus is right. We're at best case scenario. You have passively sat by and allowed your 16-year-old to become the Don Quixote for the entire family. His lack of respect for the adults involved in this case and their respective roles is appalling.
All right, that's enough. So,
Oh my God.
number one, she's telling this woman how to be a mom. Number two, she's claiming that the real alienator is the 16-year-old. You heard him. I don't know what she means by Don Quixote. That's from the famous novel, but I looked it up and I don't know how that applies to this, but whatever. But that none of the people who propagate parental alienation will ever claim that an older sibling will alienate their younger sibling. So she's just talking out of her rear end. But do you hear her? Lots of abuse. It's not been substantiated. They're talking out of the exact same playbook. It's this exact same thing you heard from Sidney Mateus. And I don't know what she means about the physical evidence. The stories never changed. And she also claimed that the visits were going fine and then they went off the rails. That's not true. I've got audio from visits. They never were going fine. So she lies, she misleads, she does everything to hide and to minimize the abuse. This guy's been accused of all kinds of abuse, and she's absolutely convinced that it didn't happen. And this hearing that you heard was from September 13th. She did switch custody. And since then, 3 of the 4 kids have lived with dad exclusively. The oldest, the one who she blames for being the alienator, is with mom, because I guess in her mind, they have to separate him from the rest of the siblings because he's the one alienating them. So the only way in her mind that this will work is if he has no contact with them. So that's how much she's terrorized and torn apart this family in order to force those kids to live in an abusive situation. And there's a guardian ad litem involved, a reunification therapist. And if you can get to the next audio, and that's at the next link, this is from the next hearing a month later. And so this is, no, it's 1:30 was right. It's, if you like right there, it's good. You're going to hear Conklin first, and then it's going to be Jessica Reed, the guardian ad litem, and just pay attention to how prepared she is to answer the question. Okay, so go ahead.
I have not followed up with.
Wait, here, go back a few seconds. Start at like 1:20, so we get it. Okay, right there. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I am not sure how many times. So that is one piece that I have not followed up with was the therapist. Because sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, Your Honor. So the last time I had spoken with the therapist about how the therapy had gone, it had gone poorly, and Dad had not been able to be in.
I'm not sure if everyone understood. She was asked if she talked to the therapist, and her first like 30 seconds was an answer. And she didn't, she should have just said, Your Honor, the dog ate my homework, because she was just completely unprepared. And one reason why she didn't know what happened with the therapist is most of these reunification therapists are corrupt, but this guy, Chavez is his last name, was saying to anyone who would listen, this isn't going to work. The kids believe their dad's abusive. I'm not going to try to convince them otherwise. It's not going to work. There's no point to having this therapy. He's very unusual. He seems to not, at least in this case, not be corrupt. But that's the guardian ad litem, and she's in charge of these kids' lives. She's completely unprepared for that question. So if you go to 15 minutes in, as a result of the guardian ad litem being completely unprepared, the judge decided that she was going to interview the kids herself. And one of the reasons she gave, and I think you'll hear it, is that I think it's, can you check in my notes? I think it's 15 minutes in. So one of the reasons she gave is because she felt there were trust issues between the kids and the guardian ad litem. So just keep that in mind as she explains what she wants done. Was I right?
I'm not sure. I don't see it in the notes. Let's try it though. I think you're right. I listened to it earlier. I think you're right about it's right in that area.
All right. It's either 15 or 16 minutes in, but go ahead.
Okay.
Let's see.
At this point for me to speak to Alexis, and I don't want to put her through that trauma.
Yeah.
It's not necessary.
Okay.
But from what I've reviewed, I think it's important that the children know that they're being heard. There's some distrust with the guardian ad litem. And so I'm going to give them a chance to come in and let me hear them. If they have any desire to talk with Ms. Reed, and I'm including Clayton in this, even though I've indicated that she doesn't represent him anymore. But if any of them wants to talk with Ms. Reed about preparing their comments, what kind of things they ought to be ready for, I'm directing Ms. Reed to assist them in preparing that presentation. They should anticipate
That's
about
good.
15 minutes
So Ms. Reed is the guardian ad litem. So right in the beginning, she says, I want to talk to them. They're not being heard. There's some trust issues with the guardian ad litem. But if they want to prepare to talk to me, they should talk to who? Ms. Reed, the guardian ad litem. It's like 10 seconds later. She ordered, and it's very unusual for a judge to talk to the kids themselves because that's how jacked up court is. She ordered that she would talk to 3 of the 4 kids. The youngest she wouldn't talk to. But to prepare, if you want to prepare, and because there's trust issues because normally she would talk to the guardian ad litem, but there's trust issues. She wants to make sure the kids are heard. But most importantly, there's trust issues between the kids and the guardian ad litem. But if you want to prepare, you should talk to the guardian ad litem who you have trust issues with.
And
That's how idiotic this judge is.
100%.
She orders that she talks to the kids because there's trust issues with the guardian ad litem, but you should talk to the guardian ad litem to prepare to talk to me.
And the interesting thing about this video too, at the end, they agreed to let the children leave with the father again and stay with him.
Right.
Granting the mother, I think it was FaceTime and email with the kids and saying the mother's not allowed to talk about the case at all to the kids, yet they're allowed to stay with the father 24/7, and there's no way to monitor what he talks to about, right?
Right, yeah. No, she can't talk about the case. You think he's following the same script? I doubt it.
No.
I doubt it. You're right. And she threw the mom a bone. This after a month, there was no contact. She's like, okay, we'll do a little FaceTime and you can do emails. And then there was another hearing. They added an extra hour a week of dinners as well. So, the mom is like bolstered. If she's not careful, she may see her kids for 3 whole hours every week. So it's just, and this is so typical of what happens in these parental alienation cases. And as I said, the prototype part of it is you immediately have these guardian ad litem, the reunification therapist, others, and that's what's happening in this case. Those kids are still there. The cops have been called 3 times since he took over, and the dad is the one calling them. He can't handle his kids. He's got to call the cops in. 3 times that he's called the cops just in September 15th or 13th. Okay. I think I've got one more audio, and this is from the Rucky case. So this is Samantha Rucky. Her mom was accused of parental alienation. I think it's 310.
Yeah.
If you can, right there. But let me set this up. So she and her younger sister ran, and then and that was April 19th, 2013. Shortly after that, they made this audio recording. She's going to describe her reunification therapist His name is Jim Gilbertson. And then later she's going to describe her dad afterwards. But he made the kids go to a hearing, and she's going to describe what happened in an interaction. She's 14 that she had with the reunification therapist, like during a break in the hearing. So go ahead and play it.
Going to, we sat outside and he kept like grabbing around my neck and like rubbing. And I told him to stop. I'm like, can you just please stop? And I'd walk away. And then like, or if we're just standing in place, he put his hand on the lower of my back, like lower back, like what couples do almost. And it's disgusting. And I told him to stop numerous times. Or he puts his hands on my shoulder. And this is not just in the last event that it's happened with him, but he's done it before when we met. And I've told him to stop every single time. Like, that's creepy. Can you stop? But this last one was different. After he like rubbed my neck, I told him to stop, and I move away. And me and Gianna would just like back up certain areas because he'd get too close. But there was a bulge in his pants this time. And normally, when people get that, it means like they're turned on, you could say. But when a 50-year-old man gets it, and we weren't doing anything but standing out there, it was kind of gross. And like, he didn't even try to excuse himself to go to the bathroom or anything. He just sat there and he was like pushing on his pant leg, like his pant upper thigh, and was like rubbing it, like not full out like that, but he was like just rubbing over his pant leg. And like, I didn't say anything to like tell him to stop, but me and Gianna definitely got really grossed out about it. Like, you're a 50-year-old man and you just got a boner, you could say, from a 14-year-old and a 13-year-old. I mean, that's not professional. That's definitely like pedophile-ish. And then to my dad, I mean, before the whole divorce thing, he'd always come home drunk, or he'd beat my mom to no end. I mean, he went after her with an organ leg once. He legit ripped an organ leg off a piano and tried to beat her with it. And then he held it up against her throat against the wall and said that he was going to kill her. But he didn't. He wanted to kill her, but he didn't want to face the consequences. And when I told Dr. Gilbertson this, he goes, unless you have a videotape of this whole incident going down, that does not, like, that never happened. Like, that was always their excuse. Well, you don't have videotape. And I'd be like, well, yes, when my mom's getting beaten to death, I'm going to videotape this whole thing. But and I mean, he's choked, slapped, and hit her and verbally abused my mother throughout their marriage. And he's lost on us kids a number of times. I mean, he threw Nia to a couch and started choking her once. And Nia's my little sister, and she's 11. One time, he made sexual comments to me over the years, like how my boobs are looking bigger. And like, when we were in the car together and I'd sit up in like the passenger front seat, he'd like grab my inner thigh, like higher inner thigh, and he'd just like rub it back and forth. I mean, that's not normal stuff fathers do. And I'd always like purposely like push it off and just like let it be like, well, you know, what am I gonna do? Because he'll lose it on me if I say anything. And over the years, my friends have not been able to come over because of my father's actions. And because their parents are afraid he's gonna lose it one of these times. And he did threaten to kill us once at the kitchen table, saying that he was homicidal and that he was gonna shoot us all. And like not even 4 weeks, or not even like a week later, there was like 6 gunshots on my voicemail of my phone at the time. I mean, what has happened over the last 7 years is ridiculous.
That's good. So the reunification therapist got off on touching a 14-year-old. That's number one. Number two, he dad ripped an organ leg off an organ, started choking mom with it, would rub his hands on his daughter's thigh, threw another daughter into a couch and started choking her. But no, none of that is believed. Parental alienation. He got the kids. Mom is a 6-time felon because 2 of the kids ran it. I'm not going to try to explain the whole story, but none of that abuse that you just heard about was taken in any seriousness. And you heard when we brought this to Dr. Gilbertson, that's the guy who got off rubbing the shoulders of a 14-year-old. So unless you have a video of it, it didn't happen. And this is how they treat allegations of abuse when they believe there's parental alienation. And it doesn't matter how much evidence you bring forward, they'll always say it's not enough because they want it to be parental alienation. They want all these people to come in. They don't care about the kids. All those kids had their lives destroyed. The Rucky kids, all the kids have their lives destroyed by what they do. But there's an industry and they make a lot of money, and that's why this happens.
What, in your opinion, this is a topic I know you get a lot of people that combat you on. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about it? Why are some people so pro parental alienation, in your opinion, from what you've seen? Is it
right?
Just
well, so they're pro parental alienation because they were alienated. Now, and I always say this: if you think you're alienated from your kids, it's not my role to tell you you're not. I'm not going to tell you how to feel, but parental alienation is still quackery. I'm not denying that what happened to you didn't happen. And many times I believe it, though sometimes parents will just throw out stuff and I'll say, well, maybe, I don't know. I wasn't there, but parental alienation is this catch-all term that's misused. There's no standards on the diagnosis, on the treatment, on the elements, on any of it. So I'm not saying that what happened to you didn't happen. What I'm saying is you have this very marginal, bogus term. So but the thing is, when you say it's not real to someone who hasn't seen their kids or whose kids don't like them because their ex is bad-mouthing them, it's like you're telling them their experience isn't real, which isn't exactly my argument, but they never understand my argument. They don't care about my argument. I'm strictly attacking the term, not their life experience, not what happened to them, and the behaviors associated with it. Many of them are real. Parents do keep kids away from each other. That happens quite a lot. Parents badmouth each other. Parents manipulate in a million different ways. There's all sorts of things that can happen. Parents buy love, they coerce love. There's a lot of different things. That doesn't make parental alienation real. When you tell me exactly what it is, then I'll tell you if it's real. Right now, no one can say exactly what it is because there's no agreement on anything. They just all say, you know what it is. No, we don't know what it is. That's the main argument. It's mostly people who have gone through it, whatever it is, and they are convinced that it is parental alienation. And here I am telling them it's not real. And their response is that I'm invalidating their own life experience. I'm saying that the hurt they're feeling right now isn't real, and I'm not. I'm attacking the term. Now, a lot of these folks, they are followers of these like psychologists and therapists who I think are all quacks, like Craig Childress, Richard Warshak, Randy Rand. There's a cadre of them. So I think they are like they buy in to quackery. But many of these folks have had a terrible experience. Many of them feel alienated. I'm not going to say they shouldn't feel alienated. Many of them haven't seen their kids or see their kids almost never. All of that is real. It happens. That doesn't make parental alienation real unless you say parental alienation is when you don't see your kids for 6 months or more or something like that. And then I would say, yeah, it's real. So then at the 6-month mark, you're at parental alienation. But that's not what people do. As I said, Julie Goffstein's ex claimed he was no longer Jewish. The rest of the family is Jewish. Obviously, I'm a victim of parental alienation. They just come up with whatever they want. And by the way, this guy took his kids from Ohio, where they were living, moved them to Florida. They were, one of the sons was in the school that Nicholas Cruz, I think that's his name, shot up. And his mom didn't even know it until he texted her. So who's the alienator? You're the one who moved the kids to another state, won't let their mom see him at all. But suddenly she's the alienator? No. And so that's really the argument comes down to that, to people who have experienced it. But I say whatever it is, and people like me who are saying, your experience is one thing, but here's a term that no one is defining and no one wants to be accurate. And you don't seem to care that much about that. And that's another thing that especially in particular, the people who have gone through it, they don't much care about like these details, like, well, there's not one definition, there's not one diagnosis, there's not one agreement on anything. They don't really care about that. And that bothers me because, all they care about was what happened to them. They don't care about all the other kids. They don't care how it's being misused. And they're helping people like David Rucky, the guy who was choking his daughter, the father of the girl you just heard, because every time you propagate it, it makes it easier for the abusive man and woman. And there's plenty of abusive women. I did a story about David Segui, former baseball player, and his ex-wife is abusive. And she's the one claiming alienation, and it worked. And he, and he's a former baseball player. So, they've really put him through the ringer. He's had like 15 of these court appointments. But they don't care that people like that are emboldened by how often you use it, because it puts it into the mainstream, mainstreams it, makes it easier to believe because all of these people are saying it happened to them. And then people like David Rucky piggyback off of your pain. And that's basically the argument. And then, look, there's a lot of dishonesty in the argument as well. There's a lot of people who benefit from parental alienation, so they argue on behalf of it. There's a lot of people who financially benefit from it, so they argue. There's a lot of, I don't know how there's disingenuous arguments against it as well. There's a lot of people who make money off of domestic violence, and so they benefit from having this term be as explosive as it can be. And it does deserve to be explosive, but there's disingenuous arguments on both sides. But I wish people would understand my argument. And I think it is a basic one. You can't define it. You can't say, here's A, B, and C for figuring out when it happens. Here's the treatment exactly as it's supposed to work. There's no standardization, and that's not how this works. And you don't do that with anything else. And if it's that subjective, then basically parental alienation exists if the court-appointed therapist says it exists, and that's not what we want at all.
100%. It reminds me of, let's just say the word change, right?
Mhm.
It's a nominalization. It's a word that means something different to everybody. You could have
Right.
what change means to you. I could have what
Right.
means to
And I
me.
wanted to add, if you want to use it, if it was only a layman's term, if it was like parents saying I'm alienated, I wouldn't have a problem with it, because it's okay if it's not that well defined. But it's sometimes it's a layman's term, sometimes it's a psychological term, sometimes it's a legal term. And a poorly defined legal term is extremely dangerous. And you can't ever decide what context it's being used. Are you just saying it as a layman? I feel alienated. Are you using it in a legal sense? Are you using it in a psychological sense? And what happens is, like, Sidney Mateus, a lawyer, says it. Well, if you're a lawyer, you're not really an expert in psychological term. And then you heard the other lawyer, Stephanie Prophet. I'm a big believer in parental. Why are you such a big believer? You're a lawyer, not a psychologist. How are you such an expert in parental alienation if it's a psychological term? Because she's an expert in its legal use. So you can never tell, is it a layman's term, a psychological term, a legal term? If it was just a layman's term, I wouldn't even be here. I wouldn't get in it, because then it would just be an academic argument. If it's just parents using it amongst themselves, that's one thing, but that's not what happens. It's misused a lot. We just showed you a handful of cases. I got a ton of them all over the world, but particularly in the country. And as I said, on top, what they've done is created an industry. As soon as the allegation is made, you have all this like cadre, this farm system of people who are ready to get appointed to try to fix it, and they'll never fix it. What they'll fix is their billing problem, meaning they'll bill you a lot of hours and they'll make a lot of money. And that, in a nutshell, is the issue. Look, I've debated it a lot. I don't know that the debate goes anywhere. It is a lot like the abortion debate or the immigration debate. People have their view. You're not going to change it. I don't try, if you firmly believe in parental alienation, there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to change your mind. And you can definitely not change my mind. And definitely you're not going to, and I hear this all the time. No, it's real. It happened to me. I'm like, oh, I've never heard that. That actually weakens your argument. You don't realize you're definitely not going to convince me by telling me it happened to you. So, as I said, if you want to convince me, then say, here's how you diagnose it exactly. Here's the symptoms exactly. Here's the treatment exactly. And then I'll tell you if it's real. Until then, it's not real because it's subjective. It's whatever each person wants it to be. And then it becomes in the eye of whoever is the court-appointed therapist. And that's not real. That's not real at all. It's not even close. I don't want people like this lady, Jean Gez, to make the decision. And by the way, like someone like Jean Gez has a financial interest in diagnosing it every single time. Because if it's not there, then she's not needed. If it is there, then she is needed. And that's why this guy Chavez from the Utah case was so surprising, because he's going against his interest. If he's saying, I can't help these kids, I don't want any part of it, then his billing stops. And that appears to be what he's saying. And look, every once in a while, you get an honest, ethical therapist who's willing to give up business. But for the most part, these folks have a financial interest in each and every time diagnosing it. And so they do. And that's one reason why there's so many cases of it.
Yeah. And it seems like this term, it's like a box that anything and everything on the floor gets thrown into, right? So
Right.
instead of having like a whole vocabulary of terms, this is what parental alienation is. If it's not that, it could be one of these other things.
Right. No.
Right.
Right. And look, the other thing that bothers me, like someone, they'll say I'm alienated. And I'll say, well, what's happening to you? Well, I haven't seen my kids in 8 months. And I'll say, well, that's actually contact denial. And what they'll say, no, that's not strong enough for what's happening. Like contact denial isn't enough for them. No, their pain is too strong to just be called contact denial. And that's basically like when you come up, when they explain it and you say, well, actually it's this much more narrow and focused, or no, you can't say that. That's not a strong enough representation of how bad things are for me. And so that's another problem. It's like these parents need like an emotional, like to feel emotionally satisfied with the term. And a lot of these arguments aren't logical. They are emotional. And that's a problem because then you take that into court and and the term is misused. As I always say, if you believe you're alienated, rather than saying parental alienation, just describe what happened. Tell me what happened. Is your ex bad mouthing you? Are you not seeing your kids? Both and one other thing. How hard is it to say, my ex bad mouths me and I haven't seen my kids in 4 months? That's like 10 seconds. Then that's it. But that's not necessarily parental alienation. But then I know what's going on. People will just use it like it's a catch-all, like you're supposed to know. I'm an alienated parent. I don't know what that means. Tell me what that means. Be more specific than I'm an alienated parent, but they don't want to. And, some of them, I don't know, they're so traumatized by what happened that they can't really describe what happened. But something bad definitely happened. And then you're just supposed to accept that it's parental alienation. And the kinds of like arguments that are made, that the parents making them, the psychologists, I think, know how dangerous they are. The parents don't. And they are so myopic about what happened to them and other of their friends that they've met, that they don't care about the consequences of the things that are happening. And they continue to use that term. They don't care that it's hurting a lot of kids. And as a result, we have nearly 60,000 reported abusive situations. And I think we're about to wrap up.
Yep. I just wanted to ask you real quick, what do you think, if you could redesign this
Mhm.
aspect of family court, obviously it all needs redesign, does that term just need to go, or? how
Yeah,
would
no,
you-
if I was able to eliminate parental alienation as a term, if it was never used, and it played even a small role, I would consider that a very successful career. Yeah, that particular term needs to go away. And what people need to do is be specific about what your ex did. Don't say my ex alienated me. My ex hasn't let me see the kids this amount of time. I know from talking to them after visits that she is constantly saying I'm a bad father, I'm a bad mother. I know that she's coercing or he's coercing them. Describe what's happening, specifically the behaviors. Stop saying parental alienation. They're basically saying it like X on its own is X. X and Y maybe just X and Y, but X, Y, and Z equals parental alienation. That's what they're saying. It's like all of these together, that's when it's parental alienation. And again, no one can say where the threshold is. As I said, like if I once said to your daughter, if you had a daughter or a son, your mom's a terrible mom, even though that's bad, I shouldn't say that. No one's going to say just the one time it's parental alienation, but no one can also say how many times, because it's all context. Because if I'm joking, then it can be a million times because the kids get it. If I'm screaming at them, it's probably less than if I say it softly and if I'm doing other things with it. So, and as I said, all good and well, except you don't know where the threshold is. And the threshold is wherever the person you bring in, you appoint decides it is. Very, very problematic. If I could get rid of that term, I'd feel very satisfied with my career. Absolutely.
And we also need professionals that are willing to do the same and to diagnose things and not just throw it under an umbrella term, like how a doctor would diagnose something and throw the same pill at the, 10.
Right. Well,
different
what we
things,
really
right?
need is to just get rid of all the professionals. And then look, the reason this is so popularized is because there's such an easy way to make money for all these professionals. If you eliminated the professionals, and I wrote a proposed law called the Elaine Podlowski Act, which would make them all illegal. You'd only have the judge, the lawyers, and the parents and who they call. And the term would still probably come up. But boy, would it come up a lot less. Because now there's no incentive to have a guardian ad litem because there's no guardian ad litem to appoint. There's no incentive to have a reunification therapist because there's no reunification therapist to appoint. So the lawyers may still make that argument, but a lot less.
100%. Mike, this is really enlightening, and it really is an important topic. There's a lot more parents coming out talking about this, bringing awareness to it, and as
Mhm.
people who are listening to podcasts like mine, shows like yours, subscribing to your Substack, this is something I don't think any parent can ever anticipate happening to them, yet it happens a lot. We know divorce rates are sky high,
Right.
right? There's so many different ways
There's
that
a lot of,
get into this.
as I've learned, there's a lot of stuff that happens a lot. False allegations happen a lot. Parents try to keep kids away from each other. That happens a lot. Abusers get custody of their kids, and that happens a lot. So yeah, it's it's so hard to try to fix it after it's happened. So anticipating it and understanding it, that'll help you. Look, if your ex has a good enough lawyer and is in the right jurisdiction, nothing's going to help you. But that doesn't always happen. That doesn't really even usually happen. If you know that you're about to get attacked with this, you can be prepared. You can fight it off. And one of the, it doesn't carry that much weight, but this is not a sound science. As I said to Prophet, the APA, the American Psychological Association, they reject it. The World Health Organization, they reject it. However much credence you give those two organizations, but they've both looked at the term and both rejected it. And you can put that into any motion, and every judge should know that you should not be allowing this term into court. It's not recognized by any like mainstream, widespread psychological body. It's recognized by these quacks like Richard Gardner, who's now dead, but all of his acolytes like Richard Warshak and Craig Childress, they recognize it, but not the psychological community as a whole. And that's an argument you can make. But yeah, no, it does happen a lot. And I can guarantee you that if you are going to raise allegations of abuse, there's a very good chance that the other side will raise allegations of parental alienation. It's almost like the lawyers know immediately to raise it. Yeah.
And you would know that more than anybody with all the cases
Yeah.
that you studied. So.
Yeah, because I've heard it. I've heard it so often that once I hear the allegation of abuse, I'm assuming that the allegation of parental alienation went the other way, because that's the default defense. It's, I didn't abuse my kids. My ex is trying to alienate me from my kids. That's why they're saying it. Never happened. 100, almost not 100%, but 99.9% of the time when the abuse allegation is made, that's the turnaround. And that was in the Rucky case. Ripped off an organ leg, doesn't matter. Choked one child, doesn't matter. Rubbed the leg of another child, doesn't matter. It's all parental alienation. None of what you heard her is real in the eyes of the court. None of what you heard her say about her father, but the way he treats the kids, none of that was real in the eyes of the court.
Yet parental alienation is real.
Right, right. That's what was
That's
real.
right.
Right. You were only saying that because you're alienated. Exactly. Right.
Well, this is really enlightening. I appreciate you so much. This is an important topic. I've actually, been more curious about myself, having heard it. I haven't known everything about it, so I learned a lot today too. Where can people find you? I know we mentioned it earlier, but let's remind everybody.
Right. My Substack is michaelvolpe.substack.com. And I do have a cool YouTube channel where I release a lot of cool audio and video. And that's at Michael Volpe. So you want to subscribe there as well.
Are you on any other social media platforms? You want to give me
Well, yeah, at Twitter at Mike Volpe. I don't remember what my handle is on Facebook, but Twitter at Mike Volpe as well.
Okay. Well, everybody, please go subscribe and follow him, support his work. As you can see, he's putting out free content by doing this. The least we can do is support him and give him a couple dollars a month to listen to all of his things and allow him to keep going. And we need to resource people like Mike so they can continue doing this. Is there anything you'd like to close with, Mike, before we go?
No, that's it. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. And you guys, thank you so much for listening and for caring. God bless you all, and we will see you next week.